that we have a deal with Canada. It'll either be a tariff on cars or it'll be a negotiated deal. And frankly, a tariff on cars is a much easier way to go, but perhaps the other would be much better for Canada. And we're looking to help, we're looking to help our neighbors too. If we can help our neighbors, that's a good thing, not a bad thing. So we're going to start that negotiation imminently. I'll be speaking with Prime Minister Trudeau in a little while. So I want to thank everybody. I want to thank you. What a great job you've all done, and it's been a long one. But a lot of people thought this was not a doable transaction. It's going to be great for our people. And again, I want to thank you, folks. And we'll see you at the signing, and we'll see you many times before that, I'm sure. So congratulations to the people of Mexico. Great job. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
That was President Trump announcing what he called one of the largest trade deals ever made with Mexico. Please stay tuned to Fox News Channel and this Fox station for continuing coverage of this story. I'm Sandra Smith in New York. President Trump terminating NAFTA, negotiating a new deal with Mexico, calling it a big day for trade, a tremendous deal, he called it. President Trump announcing the U.S.-Mexico trade agreement. That is the name that he is using, suggesting he wants to get rid of the name NAFTA, saying it had bad connotations. And as for Canada, he said, we'll see if they will be a part of this deal. Negotiations with Canada will start soon. Enrique Peña Nieto, the Mexican president, joined by speakerphone in the Oval Office there.
A presidential phone call. We got to listen in.
President Trump congratulated him and the Mexican people on this deal, saying it is incredible for both countries. And by the way, the Dow continues to surge to new highs of the day, up now 263 points, Eric.
Yeah, some specifics, 2.5% tariff, could go to 25%. We'll have a lot more on this throughout the day.
That's it for us. Outnumbered starts right now.
This Fox News alert just moments ago, President Trump making a major announcement from the Oval Office that the United States and Mexico have reached a, quote, understanding that could lead to an overhaul of the North American Free Trade Agreement, a name that President Trump doesn't even want to keep around. The president now putting Canada on the spot. This is Outnumbered. I'm Dagan McDowell, and here today, Fox News correspondent Molly Line. Good to see you.
Great to be here.
Town Hall editor, Fox News contributor Katie Pavlich, Democratic strategist, Fox News contributor Jessica Tarlov, and joining us on this sofa today, conservative radio talk show host, and honored to be in the same room with this gentleman, Larry Elder.
Well, we'll see if you feel that way at the end of the hour.
You are outnumbered. Again, I'm going to channel my best Harris Faulkner and say we're just going to cut through the weeds on this and get to the big picture on this agreement. Good to have you here, Larry.
Thank you very much for having me.
So this agreement comes after representatives from the United States and Mexico negotiated through the weekend. During the announcement, President Trump spoke over the speakerphone with the president of Mexico, doing his best chief executive officer. Now the focus moves on to Canada. Canada not involved in the tentative deal, but reports say Canada is expected to join the talks immediately. The Canadian foreign minister weighing in, saying they will only sign a new NAFTA deal that serves Canadian interest. Here's the president in the Oval Office speaking with the president of Mexico.
I like to call this deal the United States-Mexico Trade Agreement. I think it's an elegant name. I think NAFTA has a lot of bad connotations for the United States because it was a ripoff. It was a deal that was a horrible deal for our country. And I think it's got a lot of bad connotations to a lot of people. And so we will probably, you and I will agree to the name. We will see whether or not we decide to put up Canada or just do a separate deal with Canada if they want to make the deal. The simplest deal is more or less already made.
Some of the sticking points in these negotiations with Mexico, the overall NAFTA negotiations started last October, Larry, but then we started doing a bilateral deal with Mexico to iron out specific issues that we had with them. One was the dispute resolution mechanism, how we settled disputes. The U.S. didn't like the fact that all companies had to go to this international tribunal. Maybe there'll be some exemptions there. But to avoid getting in the weeds with this, the big picture is this is a movement forward on trade trade. And I'll point to these markets, the S&P, the NASDAQ, and the Russell 2000, all hitting all-time highs earlier in the day. So this is good news regardless of how you look at it.
Right. It's also a campaign promise that he's now fulfilled. And if you look at the crawl as he was speaking, the market was going up. Look, I campaigned for president with the president, but one of the things I did not like about him was the protectionism. But I got to tell you, I see now what the goal is. The goal is to lower the barriers for all of our trading partners. And it looks as if he's doing that.
Katie?
Well, politically, this is going to be interesting for Democrats because Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer have all called for a reworking of NAFTA, saying that it deeply has affected American workers, American manufacturing negatively, and the president agrees with that. And not only does he agree, he's actually walked the walk and kept his campaign promise to rework out this negotiation. When it comes to Canada, it sure puts a lot of pressure on them to come to the table. The president's saying, look, you can either get in with us, come to terms with what we're talking about, Mexico's done it, or we'll continue to put tariffs on your goods, which is not going to be good for your economy.
Well, one point, Jessica, I'll bring you in here. The Foreign Minister of Canada, Chrystia Freeland, is scheduled to go to Europe this week, visiting Germany, Ukraine, and France. So the timeline remains up in the air. But the president said that he's going to be calling Trudeau or speaking with Trudeau on
perhaps
the phone
on
about
speakerphone again for all of us.
He said
with a working speakerphone.
The president got elected to be the chief executive officer of the United States of America.
I totally get it.
That is such a boardroom thing.
It is totally a boardroom thing, and he definitely needed that this morning after the last week that he's had, and we'll get into more of that. I agree with you, Katie. It does put a lot of Democrats in a difficult spot here, and Democrats that you've seen in the middle of the country, like Sherrod Brown, Danny O'Connor, Connor Lamb, that are embracing more of President Trump's policies and saying it's okay, you can still want a Democrat in office who's going to go along with the president on X, Y, and Z issues, but I'll stand tough on Obamacare, protecting a woman's right to choose, et cetera, even if I might be personally pro-life. So it's a difficult dance, but it's a massive country, and I think politicians on both sides of the aisle are going to have to pick and choose parts of President Trump's agenda, even on the Republican side, that they're supportive of, and then make the case to their constituents come November.
Trade is, Molly, I want to get to this piece of sound that we have from the president, but trade is one of the linchpins of what he ran on and why the president won. It was bringing jobs back to the United States and creating a level playing field for everyone here in the U.S. And we still have a lot of fights ahead of us. We have steel and aluminum tariffs that we put on all of our even most important trading partners. He mentioned China in this talk, that China is not really going anywhere in terms of the negotiations that were happening last week. But again, it comes down to the farmers, and I want you to listen to this and get your reaction.
It's an incredible deal. It's an incredible deal for both parties. Most importantly, it's an incredible deal for the workers and for the citizens of both countries. Our farmers are going to be so happy. You know, the farmers have stuck with me. I said we were going to do this. And Mexico's promised to immediately start purchasing as much farm product as they can. They're going to work on that very hard.
That goes right to the voting base, the farmers, who have been hurt by retaliatory tariffs from the likes of China.
Particularly that back and forth, the trade war with China. I just did a story not too long ago about the tariffs on seafood, and that's striking the industries in Maine, the lobster industry in Maine. But as far as looking towards the midterms, interesting about this is that there will be turnover in Mexico. They have a new president-elect. It takes at least 90 days for this to go through Congress. So in a sense, this is preliminary. The deal won't be completely approved. This is a preliminary before the midterms, so we can kind of ride this as a win without actually waiting to see what the ramifications are, how it works, if it works really well. And the question he kind of laid out there was trying to rename this, and the question is Canada going to be pulled in? How greatly will this look anything like it did before? Will NAFTA exist in the future? He's kind of implied there that maybe not.
And that's, I think, going to be the big question for Democrats. Are you going to continue to say, as Chuck Schumer has, that the president talks a big game on trade but doesn't get any results while these negotiations are ongoing? And it's going to be difficult to prove them, but Democrats are going to have to go back to their districts, back to their constituencies, and senators in red states are going to have to figure out whether they are going to get on board with either the narrative or anything that passes through Congress on this issue, and choosing between Trump's agenda with trade or deciding to continue to be negative and oppose everything that he's
I'll
doing?
add to that, though, they not only have to talk to their constituents, they also need to talk to union leaders.
Right.
Because union leaders have voiced support for some of the things that President Trump wants to do. So,
oh, please, Larry, the Steelworkers Union has been wanting tariffs on imported steel
For a
forever.
long time.
Again, that's one thing people don't point out. That was a big win for the blue states. That was a big win for Democrats.
Well, that's
in
why
those
he shattered that
manufacturing
so-called blue wall. That's how he got Michigan. That's how he got Pennsylvania, by talking about trade and talking about these, what he called dumb deals. And it turns out the deals were pretty dumb. There were a lot of protectionism in there, tariffs in there, these they've been able to get rid of. It's really been quite impressive. And the way the farmers have stuck with him, even though they're being hurt short term, very impressive.
This is to all of the Trump supporters who, for months, as I said, tariffs are taxes. I'm very concerned about the destruction of jobs in steel-consuming industries. They said patience, patience. Okay, so I'm growing a little patience.
Same here. Same here.
We all need more of that.
But again, if we just really quickly, if we can put a stop to any more aggression, if we can just hold with the tariffs on the $50 billion in imports from China and the same, and if we can hold off on the auto tariffs, then move ahead with the positive developments, then that is a huge win for this president.
Absolutely.
We're expecting to hear heartfelt tributes from lawmakers on both sides of the aisle as the Senate prepares to meet later today for the first time since the death of John McCain. We're also getting new details on plans to honor the longtime lawmaker and war hero. McCain's passing also expected to have a major impact on Capitol Hill. The big changes it may signal ahead.
This program is brought to you by Lear Capital.
When you invest your hard-earned dollars, you're looking for a return on that investment, right? You want growth. So how does an average growth of 20% a year sound? And that's over the past 18 years. The precious metal with that kind of track record is gold.
Worldwide demand continues to grow. That's why experts predict gold is set to hit new highs. Here's 3 reasons why. Smart money is moving out of overvalued stocks and into gold. China and Russia are hoarding the world's gold supply. And with inflation and interest rates on the rise, gold maintains its purchasing power. Now is the time to invest in gold.
Get to know us. Our team at Lear Capital is ready to help.
Call Lear Capital now to get the ultimate guide to gold investing, and we'll send you this 1-gram gold-plated bar free. Then ask about our pledge to beat any competitor price on the largest selection of coins and bars in the industry. Don't wait. Call now. 1-800-885-6000. 1-800-885-6000.
Allergies with sinus congestion and pressure? You won't find relief here. Go to the pharmacy counter for powerful Claritin D. While the leading allergy spray relieves 6 symptoms, Claritin D relieves 8, including sinus congestion and pressure. Claritin D relieves more.
Mesothelioma is all we do. My firm has been offering a free book on mesothelioma for over 10 years. Hundreds of people with mesothelioma have chosen us to represent them. Call 1-800-300-5780 or go to mesoonlylaw.com.
All right, I brought in new Max Protein.
To give you the protein you need with less of the sugar you don't. I'll take that.
30 grams of protein and 1 gram of sugar. New Ensure Max Protein and 2 great flavors.
We knew Angie's List had reviews of home pros.
But so do lots of websites.
I didn't want to pay.
Then I found out it's free. Wait, it's free?
Free to check ratings, read reviews.
And they'll even match your project with a few qualified pros for the job.
Go to angieslist.com today.
What if your pharmacy didn't act like a pharmacy? What if you never had to sort your pills? And taking your medication was this easy? What if everything was delivered to you, so you never had to waste time standing in line? PillPack is a new kind of pharmacy. We'll sort your medication and deliver it directly to your door. It's your medication made easy. Learn more at pillpack.com.
Fox Nation. Find out more at foxnation.com now.
If a dirty CPAP is making you sick, you're not alone.
I was getting sinus infections because I wasn't cleaning my CPAP properly. And that continued until I got my SoClean.
SoClean is the world's first automated hands-free CPAP cleaner and sanitizer. It kills 99.9% of all CPAP germs and bacteria that can build up in your mask, hose, and reservoir.
I don't have to push a button or anything. I just put the mask in the chamber, close the lid, and it runs automatically. SoClean is has been a lifesaver.
SoClean works on all popular CPAP machines and masks. Try it risk-free for 30 days. Even shipping is free. Call 1-800-296-7286 to take advantage of this limited time offer.
If you get a CPAP machine, don't even take it home until you have your SoClean machine right with it, because they are a marriage made in heaven.
Try SoClean risk-free for 30 days. Even shipping is free. Call 1-800-296-7286 or go to trysoclean.com.
Fox News alert, the Senate is preparing to meet later today for the first time since the death of Arizona Senator John McCain. We expect an outpouring of tributes from both sides of the aisle. McCain, the Republican lawmaker known as the Maverick, served in the Senate for more than 3 decades and is also remembered as a war hero for his time in captivity as a POW in Vietnam. Now we're learning details on plans for memorial services. Chief Congressional Correspondent Mike Emanuel is live on Capitol Hill with more. Mike?
Molly, good afternoon to you. Folks in his home state of Arizona will get to pay their respects first before the focus shifts here to Washington. Senator John McCain will lie in state in the Capitol Rotunda on Friday before a private ceremony that morning. On Saturday, a national memorial service will be held at the National Cathedral with family, friends, congressional colleagues, staff, and some world leaders invited. Then on Sunday, a private memorial service will take place at the U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland, where McCain will be laid to rest next to his Naval Academy classmate and lifelong friend. A Senate Democrat reflected today on McCain's impact in trying to find common ground with others.
That's one of the biggest lasting legacies of Senator McCain, was that he never stopped trying to find ways to work with people, even if they'd been opponents. That tireless work to bridge divides was one of the things that most impressed me about this great man.
McCain was elected to Congress back in 1982. He had served in the United States Senate since 1987, more than 30 years. And many senators are talking about McCain's role as a mentor and his leadership on foreign policy issues in particular.
It is hard to fill the void. Without any question, John McCain believed in American exceptionalism. He used that perch, the perch of American exceptionalism, to challenge his fellow senators to look beyond themselves and to look into the future and to make sure that we were designing a country that would be better for the next generation of Americans than it was for the current generation of Americans.
You can expect plenty more praise for the life and legacy of Senator John McCain when the Senate gavels back into session at 4 p.m. Eastern Time today. Molly?
Mike Emanuel, thank you. We will be watching. Growing questions about what's next in Washington after the loss of Senator John McCain, who was a towering presence on Capitol Hill. Former Republican Senator Kelly Ayotte recalling how McCain was able to work across party lines. Watch.
He just had the courage of his convictions, and he really was a true bipartisan champion, someone who was focused on getting things done for the American people, and he had that political courage.
Meantime, the Washington Post reporting that McCain's passing marks a new era for congressional checks on President Trump. The Post noting that McCain was a frequent critic of the president while heading the Senate Armed Services Committee, which will now be chaired by Senator James Inhofe, a Trump supporter, and Senator James Risch will take the Republican leadership post in the new Senate Foreign Relations Committee when frequent Trump critic Senator Bob Corker steps down at the end of the year. The Post writes that this all makes for, quote, a sweeping change in how Congress may use its oversight authority to check the president's international agenda, according to current and former lawmakers, lobbyists, and policy watchers. A changing of the guard with potentially enormous consequences for holding the president to account during crisis. Larry, I want to start with you, of course, because you're here in the middle and you're in the hot seat. Does the Washington Post have a point here when they raise that what's happening there in Congress, some of the leadership may be a bit more friendly to the president now going forward?
You know, Molly, what I'm seeing here is a parade of hypocrites. The praise that's coming out for John McCain, of course, is well-deserved. But where were these people praising his bipartisanship when he needed it in 2008 when he was running for president? The Washington Post admitted that they had more stories of Obama on the front page, more flattering stories of Obama, more photographs of Obama, more flattering photographs of Obama than McCain. The New York Times wrote a flattering editorial just the other day about John McCain, said we could use more men like him. Well, 2008, the New York Times in Obama for President had an editorial, and it said that John McCain's campaign is run based on, quote, class warfare, partisan divide, and even hints of racism, end of quote. Where were they then? This is just outrageous the way they treated him in 2008. Now, all of a sudden, he's this saint.
You know, you talk about the run to 2008. It's not easy to run for president, and there are some moments where Senator McCain certainly showed enormous class. The most notable one that's been replayed here since his death is when someone accused the president of being an Arab, and he immediately snagged that microphone in the midst of a town hall, even got a few boos, defending his competitor there in that process, and it was a very competitive race. Those people in politics that can act there in that moment, you know, who can step into that place right now? Katie?
That's the big question. Arizona Governor Doug Ducey has a big decision to make. There's been a couple of names floated around. One of them is Ducey's chief of staff, Kirk Adams. He is a former state representative or former state speaker. He's 45 years old. He's young. Former Senator John Kyle, who I actually interned for in college, I will say, being from Arizona, has been floated as well as a temporary solution to the vacancy. The appointment will not be made until Senator McCain is buried, so at least until next week, and the appointment will be until 2020 when they will hold a special election. So they've actually held the names of who may take the seat very closely. There could be someone who you haven't heard of who may be appointed, so we'll just have to see how it goes.
His wife Cindy has also been.
His wife has been floated as well. But just on a personal note, I remember after he ran for president and lost in 2008, being a journalism student and covering and going to some of his rallies in Arizona when he was running for re-election in the Senate, and when Sarah Palin was still campaigning for him. And it was just really interesting to see how he was also treated in the media, and it was so different than what we're seeing now. But it certainly is an end of an era in Arizona, and a lot of people agreed with his policies. A lot of people did not, but everyone is able to put those things aside and respect his service to the country and the things that he has done.
Let's just say that no one can and will fill John McCain's shoes.
Irreplaceable.
There's only one John McCain.
Right.
But the suggestion or the smell wafting off of some of these articles seems to say that that kind of greatness in a different way doesn't exist in other women or men. And I patently reject that.
Right, I agree.
That there are going to be different people. Because words fail me often. I'll quote the Wall Street Journal today. Gordon Lubold wrote this article, and he said, as a third-generation naval officer and his detention in Vietnam, Mr. McCain had the moral authority and stature to question the executive branch, the Pentagon, and its top military officers in a way few others are able and willing to do. And I thought that summed it up. But there are other people who will challenge the status quo, challenge the swamp. Yeah. And I reject that anybody taking these jobs is automatically in the bag for Trump.
It's also beyond just challenging the swamp. I mean, this is a man who served the country honorably, who did something in captivity that I'm not sure I know that many people who would have made it there. I think it was 5.5 years. No,
but I was addressing that article in the Washington Post about who's taken over the Senate.
I understand. I was saying there's just so much more to this legacy and the way that it's being discussed. The idea of service comes into play here because we don't have as many people serving in government necessarily who have served in our armed services. And I just want to point that obviously we're all thinking of the McCain family right now as we're even discussing this. And I think that Governor Ducey has played this properly. And first of all, pushing aside anyone who months ago started talking about wanting his seat, saying you are immediately out of the running if you are even discussing that. And the most recent reports are that Cindy McCain will not be the one getting the seat, and it will be someone who's served.
And of course, ultimately, we have a week here ahead where we'll be remembering Senator McCain as irreplaceable, even as these discussions
the president
go on.
can muster some kind words for him at some point soon. That would be appreciated.
We need to move on. After the shooting at an online video game tournament in Jacksonville, Florida left 3 dead, 9 wounded. Top Democrats like Nancy Pelosi and Dick Durbin wasting no time, demanding Congress take action on gun reform. Are they politicizing tragedy, and are they doing it too soon?
People with type 2 diabetes are excited about the potential of once-weekly Ozempic. In a study with Ozempic, a majority of adults lowered their blood sugar and reached an A1C of less than 7 and maintained it.
Under 7?
And you may lose weight. In the same 1-year study, adults lost on average up to 12 pounds.
Oh, up to 12 pounds?
A 2-year study showed that Ozempic does not increase the risk of major cardiovascular events like heart attack, stroke, or death.
Oh, no increased risk?
Oh.
Ozempic should not be the first medicine for treating diabetes or for people with type 1 diabetes or diabetic ketoacidosis. Do not share needles or pens. Don't reuse needles. Do not take Ozempic if you have a personal or family history of medullary thyroid cancer, multiple endocrine neoplasia syndrome type 2, or if you are allergic to Ozempic. Stop taking Ozempic and get medical help right away if you get a lump or swelling in your neck, severe stomach pain, itching, rash, or trouble breathing. Serious side effects may happen, including pancreatitis. Tell your doctor if you have diabetic retinopathy or vision changes. Taking Ozempic with a sulfonylurea or insulin may increase the risk for low blood sugar. Common side effects are nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, stomach pain, and constipation. Some side effects can lead to dehydration, which may worsen kidney problems.
I discovered the potential with Ozempic.
Ask your healthcare provider if Ozempic is right for you.
It's South Beach Diet's Healthy Living Sale. Join for free and get $100 in free food. Lose weight fast and get in the best shape of your life.
I'm Jesse James Decker, and if y'all want to know how I stay in shape, I do it with the South Beach Diet.
Lose up to 9 pounds and 3 inches in your first 2 weeks. Order your 28-day plan today and get fully prepared meals delivered to your door.
I'm healthy and in the best shape of my life.
South Beach is a low-sugar, high-protein, low-carb lifestyle that burns fat and transforms your metabolism.
I lost 24 pounds on the South Beach Diet.
Order your 28-day plan now and receive a week of best-selling South Beach Complete Shakes free. They're packed with 20 grams of protein, a great source of probiotics, and taste great. Act now. Join for free and get $100 in free food.
Trust me, the South Beach Diet works. Call or click right now.
Call 855-739-PLAN or go to southbeachdiet.com/sale and get $100 in free food plus shakes free.
The kitchen is where family and friends spend most of their time. That's why it's easy for cabinets to become worn or faded with use. Give your cabinets a refresh or a whole new look with enhanced wood refinishing. Our innovative process offers a much higher quality and durability than just painting your cabinets, and more convenience and a lower cost than traditional kitchen remodels. Get the beauty and long-lasting finish you dream of with the convenience and affordability you desire. Enhance. Wood refinishing done right.
Have you ever seen the emerald waters of Barbados? Or seen a butler walk on water to please you? Have you ever stayed in the world's most romantic suites? Or dined at 11 world-class restaurants in one resort? Have you ever imagined such 5-star luxury is all-inclusive? Sandals Barbados, where exclusive is always inclusive. Call 1-800-SANDALS today.
I'd like to take a moment to address my fellow veterans, because I know so many of you have served our country honorably. One of the benefits that we as a country give you as a veteran is the eligibility for a VA loan for up to 100% of your home's value. If you need cash for your family, call New Day USA. With automatic authority from the VA, we can say yes when banks say no. Give us a call.
Call now, 1-855-376-1361.
This Fox News alert as federal agents searched the Baltimore home of the suspect in yesterday's deadly shooting in Jacksonville, Florida. Police say 3 people are dead, including the gunman, 9 others wounded, at a Madden NFL online video game tournament in a Jacksonville mall. Police believe the gunman was David Katz and say he used at least 1 handgun. They say he died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Here's what one eyewitness had to say.
I saw the back of his head. He was actually backing out of where he was shooting from. We heard the first round, and then we saw 2, 3, 4. Oh, we heard 2, 3, 4 more rounds. The only thing I saw was that he had the gun in his hand, and the other hand was support, like a small gun. I didn't see a rifle or anything else.
Phil Keating is live in Jacksonville with the very latest. Phil.
Dagan, the killer had won a previous Madden NFL gaming tournament, and in an interview regarding that online, he exhibited quite a bit of cockiness and swagger about his abilities and skills at playing an NFL video game. Well, yesterday he lost was eliminated from the tournament, left, and when he returned, 30 seconds of loud pops. This all happening at the Jacksonville Landing. That's a popular place downtown Jacksonville with about a dozen bars and restaurants. The place that hosted the tournament is a place called Good Luck Have Fun Gaming Bar, which is exactly what the gamers were doing. According to at least one witness, David Katz appeared quite angry after losing, suspecting that was his motivation. The sheriff's department is not declaring that, nor speaking on whether they think he came from Maryland with a plan to kill. But the dozens of gamers inside at the time describe it at all as pure pandemonium.
People were being trampled, people were hiding, everybody was screaming in fear.
A friend who was inside told me that when everything started happening, a lot of the guys actually barricaded themselves in a very large bathroom, and they were just kind of behind the stalls. So they stayed in there the entire time. There was really no way to escape where we were playing from. You were pinned in there.
The two people killed by the gunman are Taylor Robertson of Ballard, West Virginia, and Eli Clayton of Woodland Hills, California. In fact, most of the competing gamers had flown into Jacksonville from all over, hoping to win this regional tournament to then be able to go to Vegas for the upcoming Madden NFL National Championships with a total prize of $200,000 for the winner. There is money to be made in the gaming industry if you're not too familiar with it. One of his competitors, one of his rivals in gaming competitions, described the shooter, Katz, as being, quote, a little different. Unlike most of the other gamers, they're all jovial and social at these get-togethers. They say he would never really talk much, just come in, compete, and then leave. Dagan?
Phil Keating, thank you so much. Phil in Jacksonville, Florida for us. Swift reaction to the shooting coming from the left on Capitol Hill. House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi and Illinois Senator Dick Durbin calling on Congress to enact stricter gun legislation. Durbin tweeting this: I'm heartbroken for Jacksonville. No community should have to suffer from such senseless gun violence. When will Congress have the courage to stand up to the NRA and pass meaningful reforms to help prevent these shootings in America? Meanwhile, Pelosi releasing a statement reading in part, our thoughts and prayers are not enough. As we continue to learn new details about today's horrific shooting, Congress must stop stalling and act to protect Americans from the gun violence epidemic. Larry, to you on this. At issue is the fact that, particularly on the left, they start weighing in on a shooting when they don't have any of the facts, and they're proposing what when they don't even have even small details about what happened.
Yeah, but this is the same charge, Dagan, that was made against Republicans just a few days ago after Molly Tippins died, and the president started talking about border security. Look, Democrats legitimately and in good faith believe, I shouldn't say legitimately, they're wrong-headed about it, but in good faith they believe that we need more common sense gun control legislation. And they believe that more common sense gun control legislation might have stopped something like this. They're wrong about that, but I don't think you can be surprised that the Democrats are going to react that way. Republicans feel very strongly about the border. When an illegal alien kills an American citizen, Republicans are going to talk about more border security. This is just the way things are. I don't find that surprising or offensive at all.
Katie, but when they come out, what I was saying is, for example, in the Parkland shooting in Florida, it was earlier this year. Democrats come out immediately before we have most of the important details about what happened. And the FBI was at fault in the Parkland shooting. They had a very specific tip about the murderer in that instance being a danger and a threat to people at the school. The FBI ignored another tip where there was a comment posted by the murderer on YouTube. That's my point, is that they focus on changing gun laws, but not the bigger picture.
Well, the first thing I would say is we always hear the same narrative of common sense gun reforms. I don't hear a lot of details specific to the incidents that occur. In this case, a handgun was used. The venue was a gun-free zone. They said you couldn't bring in your own weapon for self-defense, but then they didn't provide proper security. You have
they had no security at all.
Yeah, you have a number of people now who are in the tournament and CEOs of the teams that were involved here saying, hello, we had no security, we're sitting ducks, we have to take this seriously and have more security in the future. And to your point, Dagan, in the spring, there was a mass shooting threat lobbed against one of these tournaments of 15,000 people in Las Vegas, and here we are now with no security at this event in Florida. And so this idea that we keep hearing about common sense gun reform, that the solution is going to come from Washington, D.C. when it happens at a local level, in a place where they just passed new gun reforms. To your point, they always offer solutions when they don't have all of the facts of the case to actually come up with some tangible things to prevent these things from happening in the future.
So I completely understand your point, and I appreciate what you said there, Larry, because you did my work actually with having to go back to last week with the Molly Tibbetts situation, which was it was immediate. Close the border, close the border. This is what happens when, you know, it's free and anyone can walk in and they're killing Americans here. We have seen concrete proposals, at least on the state level, that have worked. We've seen that happen in Connecticut. If you look at the guns rights organizations like Moms Demand, et cetera, they do have proposals for what they're looking for. But I think more than anything, this is just an emotional response. And I understand that when there are innocents being slaughtered, there should be more security. And there are a number of Parkland parents who have put their support behind that, saying, like,
there are also Parkland parents who vehemently disagree, who have been completely snubbed out of all of the coverage, who do not agree with more gun control, who do not believe with
I'm talking
Moms
about the
Demand.
Security.
They do not believe in anything
officers,
that the
but not
anti-gun
arming
movement has been pushing in terms of security for their kids. They want things like gun-free zones like this situation, and they don't want people to be able to be in a position to defend themselves with security. They don't want teachers with guns.
They don't.
And what is the common sense gun control law that
define
that
it?
would be proposed?
I mean, it's a whole proposal. I mean,
what's the one?
Well, closing loopholes, like the gun show loophole.
Is that applicable in this situation?
No, well, we don't have the details.
If you do nothing, weigh in immediately after an incident, which you, I think, all sort of touched on this point, is that they tend to weigh in rather vaguely. They call for reforms. They criticize.
But there are. I mean, I'll pull them all up while we're in break. They actually exist. To say that and then to say, well, Democrats do this, but Republicans are just saying,
actually
build a wall.
States can do certain things, like gun violence,
like they have in Connecticut and in Florida.
In California, we closed the gun show loophole a long time, and they still want more common sense measures.
Because when they say common sense, Katie Pavlich, you know what they mean? It means basically changing the Constitution and getting rid of our Second Amendment
and
rights.
Does owning a weapon border mean get all the illegals
being circulated among Republicans on Capitol Hill, previewing a massive list of investigations they believe Democrats would launch if they flipped the House. The implications for the midterms and beyond.
As I was aging, the pain in my hips was getting worse and worse.
So I ordered Relief Factor for pain I was having in my neck and my knees.
After 30 years of back pain, I have found relief.
I am pain-free. I love it.
I am so glad that I ordered Relief Factor.
I am now pain-free. Thank you, Relief Factor.
Folks, I don't know how to tell you how rewarding it is to hear all the wonderful Relief Factor success stories. Pat Boone again. Let me ask you, are aches and pains keeping you from sleeping through the night? Or keeping you from taking those nice long walks or playing golf or tennis? You can't really call it living if you can't get around comfortably. The 3-week quick start from Relief Factor may be all you need to lower or even eliminate these pains. Here's something you need to know. The majority of people who order the 3-week quick start, now only $19.95, go on to order more. Let's see if we can get you out of pain too. Go to ReliefFactor.com.
Have you been told you need neck or back surgery? If so, you do have a choice. Call Laser Spine Institute and say yes to a pain-free life with our minimally invasive spine surgery. It's safer than open back surgery, letting you get back to living life on your terms.
I can lift my son high over my head again.
If you have spinal stenosis, bulging or herniated disc, sciatica, or other chronic spine conditions,
call 1-800-736-BACK now for your free MRI review.
Thanks to a less than 1-inch incision, you'll be up and walking within hours of surgery, so you can get back to your life in days instead of months.
I feel like Laser Spine Institute was an answer to prayer.
Join the thousands of people every year who say goodbye to chronic neck and back pain with Laser Spine Institute. Make today the day you say yes to living a pain-free life.
Call 1-800-736-BACK now for your free MRI review.
Promote what makes your business great with Vistaprint. Whether it's a business card, a banner, or a postcard, we have the paper stocks, sizes, and design options to create marketing that's right for your business. Give it a try with 500 standard business cards card starting at just $9.99 when you use code VP500 at Vistaprint.com.
I lost 25 pounds on Jenny Craig.
From a top diet 8 years straight comes the all-new Rapid Results by Jenny Craig. Lose up to 16 pounds in just 4 weeks with food you love. Eat 6 times a day with no prepping or cooking.
You have your breakfast, lunch, and dinner ready to go. It's all laid out for you.
So you can get on with your day and watch the pounds melt off.
Man up, give them a call.
Start Rapid Results and lose 16 pounds for $16 plus the cost of food and get $120 in free food.
With TripAdvisor, finding your perfect hotel at the lowest price is as easy as dates, deals, done. Simply enter your destination and dates and see all the hotels for your stay. TripAdvisor searches over 200 booking sites to show you the lowest prices so you can get the best deal on the right hotel for you. Dates, deals, done. TripAdvisor. Visit tripadvisor.com.
For those who are driven by purpose, who are building others instead of just wealth, giving back and never giving up, TIAA will help you live your definition of success. Whether you have $500 or $5 million. Investing, advice, banking, retirement. TIAA. Start today at TIAA.org.
Republicans on Capitol Hill, including at least one leadership office, circulating a detailed spreadsheet, they love spreadsheets, that previews the series of investigations they believe Democrats may launch on the Trump administration if they flip the House. Axios obtained the document, dubbing it the Hell List. It details expected probes on anything from Trump's tax returns to his family businesses, investigations that could effectively cripple the administration. Congressman Jerry Nadler, who would chair the House Judiciary Committee if Democrats win the majority, said they would investigate Russian meddling, more of that, if any Americans aided it. He also said this.
The role of Congress is not to protect the president, it's to hold the president and any president accountable to the American people. And we ought to be holding investigations.
Former campaign manager to President Trump, Corey Lewandowski, predicts impeachment would top the Democrats' agenda if they flip the House. Take a listen.
When you look at Maxine Waters, who is slated to become the chairman of the House Financial Services Committee, Jerry Nadler from New York, the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee if they take over, they have no plan for the American people, so their only plan is to be obstinate and obstacles to the Trump economic agenda. And that means starting an impeachment proceeding where there is none to be found, but that will completely stymie a Washington, D.C., which is candidly already broken.
But Democrats continue to downplay that scenario. Here's California Congressman Adam Schiff.
I think as a matter of our constitutional responsibility, we have to look candidly at what is the evidence and what does that mean and what does that say in terms of whether we've reached the point of high crimes and misdemeanors. But I don't think we should be talking about it and embracing it before we've seen the full body of evidence.
So, Larry, this means more Stormy Daniels, more Russia investigations. To me, this seems like the resistance with subpoena power.
Adam Schiff is the same guy who just a few weeks ago said that there's evidence of collusion, there's evidence of collusion. By the way, there's evidence of collusion. Now he's saying, you know, we need to get our ducks in a row before we decide whether or not the president ought to be impeached. Maxine Waters just said the president should be impeached, quote, and will be impeached, close quote. That is exactly what they're going to do if and when they take control of the House. I hope they won't. I don't think they will. I think the race is getting closer and closer. The Fed of Atlanta just estimated that next quarter GDP growth might be 4.6%. That's back-to-back GDP growth of 4%. If it's the economy stupid, and I still believe it's the economy stupid, it seems to me that Donald Trump will have a really good headwind going into November.
Jessica, you have never been a proponent of impeachment, but I'm not sure a lot of people believe that Democrats wouldn't go down that path, given this long list that they have.
A long list that has stuff on there besides Russia collusion. I mean, it has legitimate ethics violations, how the Trump family businesses...
Alleged.
Alleged to everything I'm about to say. How the Trump organization and the Trump family are benefiting from their businesses still, how they haven't properly divested. Things obviously having to do with how the family businesses work. And anyway, everyone can read the list, and you should. It's compelling. I maintain my front on the no impeachment route. I think there will be figures who will take a more prominent position, like a Maxine Waters out there doing it. But I think if you look at the statements from Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and Jerry Nadler as of late, who will essentially be in charge of all of this, they are very clear about it. They understand also how motivating that is for the Republican base. If there's anything that's going to close the enthusiasm gap,
that's why they're saying
but I don't actually think that they're
being
dishonest.
The day after they win, their rhetoric will change. Night and day.
The fate of America, at least looking through a Democrat's eyes, which work with me here.
My mom was a Democrat. My brother's a Democrat. I work with Democrats all the time.
They sound lovely.
Thank you. They were lovely.
A Mike Pence presidency is a much more cohesive presidency. He will be able to get Republicans more in line. We will not have the brash tweets. We will not have the talking out of order. You will not have Stormy Daniels a la Mike Pence. And you will get a lot more done. I believe Republicans will. And Democrats really don't want that.
So, Molly,
that's the scarier scenario. You just leaped the Atlantic Ocean with that.
I know. I was like,
you just jumped way.
I don't want President Trump to be impeached because I really don't want President Mike Pence.
Pence would be worse if you're on the left. He's a fiscal conservative and a social conservative.
Yeah, it would be like the Handmaid's Tale all over.
Oh, boy. Okay, the other side of this coin is if Democrats get a hold of all of these committees and they have subpoena power, that also means that they're going to be giving lots of stories to the media.
Yeah, politically, I mean, who knows how powerful that could be ultimately if they actually get control of all these committees. And it could theoretically certainly shift discussions in Washington because they'd be the head of the committees and can do more of what they want to see get done. The other big question, though, is whether or not this would be good for Democrats. If they really do dig into all this stuff in these committees, President Trump's tax returns, dealings in his business. He was a businessman. He had his taxes. He still got elected without releasing the tax returns. He got elected by America knowing that he had this big, complicated business and that his family was involved in a big, complicated
business. And knowing
business.
that he was a playboy.
And he was still elected. So if Democrats do happen to take control of these committees and get a majority in the House and they go down that road and spend a lot of time in that road, then they're not spending time on the other things that maybe their constituents would prefer. So I don't know that
backfire
would
on
necessarily
Democrats with what they're doing. I mean, is it going to look petty if they take over these committees and don't actually deliver on their campaign promises in the House?
Well, that's why they're saying the ixnay on the impeachment talk, because they have nothing else. That is their sole agenda, is vote us in, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, and we will impeach the president. It's what they're running on. That's what the entire, let me finish. That's what the entire resist movement is built on. Because what are they going to do? What have they done that not one single Democrat voted for the tax cuts? That is juicing this economy. They have not, what are they going to put all these regulations back in place that President Trump has rolled back and gotten rid of to basically free the animal spirits and get the economy growing again?
Right now, Fox News poll, Obamacare is popularity 51%, tax cut it's at 40%. How do you explain that then?
You know what? I say that poll doesn't matter one hillbilly squat, because
not sure what that is. But
if you go,
it's not redneck squat.
That's my way.
Only Dagan understands.
That's my way of not cursing.
I got you.
National TV, Larry.
But Dagan, they got it.
I would just want to point out really quickly, they are walking instead of talking. They are going to Walmart and Target, which have had their best quarterly sales in more than a decade. And it's not just the discount retailers. It is Nordstrom, you name it, Home Depot. People are out spending. That's what tells you the economy is in great shape.
But it's not fair to say Democrats don't have an agenda. They do. $15 minimum wage, free tuition, guaranteed federal job, march towards single payer. That's what they want to do.
But if they spend all their time talking about, this list that was put out, this big scary list of potential investigations that could be, then those
But
messages
they don't. You didn't hear
out.
any of that out of Connor Lamb's mouth or Danny O'Connor's mouth. That isn't what Sherrod Brown is out on the trail talking about. Yes, of course, if you're going to go to an Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez rally or listen to Cynthia Nixon. Yeah, but that was my point in the earlier block. This is what the right wants you to think Democrats are talking about, but they are talking about.
Democrats are also fighting about these issues, but we have to move on.
Okay.
To another segment. I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
Polling shows President Trump appears to be defying critics' hopes of major blowback after his associates got faced with big legal troubles last week. We'll show you the findings and break down what it all means ahead of the midterms.
Identity thieves know if your social security number is on the dark web. Do you? Find out with Experian. Go to Experian.com/protect for a dark web scan. It's completely free, so visit Experian.com/protect today.
Okay, everyone, our mission is to provide complete balanced nutrition for strength and energy.
Great tasting Ensure with 9 grams of protein and 26 vitamins and minerals. Ensure, now up to 30 grams of protein for strength and energy.
It was love at first slice. Pizza lovers everywhere meet Oh That's Good frozen pizza. 1/3 of our classic crust is made with cauliflower, but that's not stopping anyone. Oh That's Good.
Hi, I'm Mike Ditka. Some days, even Iron Mike feels a little rusty, so I turn to Blue Emu. Blue Emu's non-greasy, deep-penetrating formula gets down deep for big-time comfort. And more importantly, it doesn't leave me smelling like a locker room. Blue Emu works fast and won't stink.
You always pay your insurance on time. Tap one little bumper and up go your rates. What good is having insurance if you get punished for using it? Newsflash, nobody's perfect.
For drivers with accident forgiveness, Liberty Mutual won't raise your rates due to your first accident. Switch and you could save $782 on home and auto insurance. Call 1-888-686-3155 for a free quote today. Liberty Mutual Insurance.
Liberty, 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 liberty.
Honoring John McCain. As the Senate reconvenes after his passing, Neo has special coverage and powerful reaction tonight on Your World.
Hi, I'm Joan London with A Place for Mom, the nation's largest senior living referral service. For the past 5 years, I've spoken with hundreds of families and visited senior care communities around the country. And I've got to tell you, today's senior living communities are better than ever. These days, there are amazing amenities like movie theaters, exercise rooms and swimming pools, public cafes, bars and bistros, even pet care services. And nobody understands your options like the advisors at A Place for Mom. These are local expert advisors that will partner with you to find the perfect place and determine the right level of care, whether that's just a helping hand or full-time memory care. Best of all, it's a free service. There is never any cost to you. Senior living has never been better, and there's never been an easier way to get great advice. Call today. A Place for Mom. You know your family. We know senior living. Together, we'll make the right choice.
Looking back, you've seen some amazing things. And looking forward, there's so much more to come. That's why VSP offers individual vision plans, coverage you can buy on your own, because retirement shouldn't be the end of vision care, but a new beginning. VSP gives you affordable access to trusted eye doctors in your area and gives you the lowest out-of-pocket costs on necessities that traditional Medicare doesn't cover, like glasses, contacts, and specialty prescription lenses. This makes regular eye exams more affordable, trusted eye doctors more accessible, and ensures that prescriptions, like Progressives, are done right the first time. For lifelong access to eyewear and eye care, put your trust in the same quality coverage employers offer and learn more at vspdirect.com or call 888-8-BY-VSP to see better for life for less.
Thank you, VSP.
New signs that President Trump may be weathering the media firestorm over last week's legal controversies involving his one-time associates, like former attorney Michael Cohen's plea deal and the conviction of former campaign chairman Paul Manafort, amongst others. A new Wall Street Journal NBC News poll shows the president's approval holding steady at 44%. That compares with a 46% rating earlier last week, mostly before the legal developments. The slight change was within the poll's margin of errors in both cases. A Democratic pollster who helped work on the surveys saying the results are a letdown for Trump critics who hoped Cohen and Manafort's legal troubles would be a watershed in the midterms. Instead, that pollster says what happened last week, quote, represents a fool's gold opportunity rather than a silver bullet solution. Okay, so I wasn't surprised that his personal approval rating didn't go down because we've seen this before. There have been big controversies, and it doesn't seem to change, and you kind of have to measure everything else. But what do you make of what's going on poll-wise, Larry?
The president takes a licking and keeps on ticking. He always has. And you look at his numbers within the black community, for crying out loud. There's a Rasmussen poll that has his numbers in the 30s. That's an outlier. The NAACP has a poll that has his number 21% of black support. That's 3 times what he got when he was elected. It's pretty astounding. And when you look at the pounding he's been taking in the media, NBC, ABC, CBS, 91% or so of the news negative. Imagine if the news were truly, quote, fair and balanced, how well he would do. There's a book called Left Turn written by a friend of mine named Tim Grosclose. He's tried to quantify the damage done by the left-wing media. He says if the media were truly fair and balanced, the average state would vote the way Texas does, which is about 8 to 10 points for the Republican. We talk about collusion. We talk about Russian meddling. The biggest interference, in my opinion, in the election is the left-wing media that's just so hostile to Republicans, and in particular hostile to this guy.
I would say I agree with you on the media thing, but I also think that the media has given President Trump so much earned media. It's unbelievable how much they've done.
And then they regret it.
But this is the thing that they do, though. I mean, we have seen the president use it to his advantage, invite the media into the Oval Office where he has these big meetings with the cabinet, and into the White House where they're just playing out the pool spray, right? We do that here on this show, and the American people can see that raw and see what they're doing and see that he's working. And then all the stuff around it is kind of just noise when it's so negative. So I think that people actually see it. They see what he's doing. They see results in their own household about having more of their own money, being employed again. These districts that used to be Obama voting districts are now saying that the president has gotten them results. It was worth voting for him. And quite frankly, Republicans who were skeptical about him going into the election have seen that he's actually done a lot that they approve of.
If you look at the internals of this NBC News Wall Street Journal poll that came out, and this is to the media point, was somewhat surprising. Have you seen, read, or heard the news coverage about Michael Cohen pleading guilty? 20% said no. When asked the same question about Paul Manafort being found guilty, 14% said no. And then they asked about the 6 members of the people who were associated with the Trump campaign who had pleaded guilty or had been found guilty of crimes. 30% said don't know enough to say. So it remains to be seen whether those numbers change in the coming weeks. If suddenly somebody's going to turn on some other network.
It has nothing to do with their life. It does not affect them. They don't have the time in their lives to be dealing with those issues. They don't affect them. They put it aside and they want to be focused on what is benefiting them, and that's the economy.
Or they decided, like you pointed out earlier in the show, that they didn't care. They knew who he was coming in, and that probably because he was a playboy and kind of I don't want to say a dirty businessman, but he had, real estate deals that maybe weren't kosher, that his lawyer was not going to be the most upstanding guy. But if you do look at the breakdown, for instance, of the Fox News poll from just a few days ago, the only issue area that the president isn't underwater on is the economy there. He is struggling on national security, border security, health care, which is the Democrats' #1 issue. So President Trump isn't on the ballot come November. How do you think Republicans are going to fare? Separating, he'll be fine, but what happens to them?
I still think Republicans are going to do just fine. There's an interesting story right now going on in Abilene, Texas. There was no city that voted more in favor of Trump than Abilene. 80% of the people voted for Trump. They just elected their first black mayor. He got elected by almost the same amount. So if Trump supporters are worried about the country changing from white to a nation of color, if Trump supporters are racist, how do you explain Abilene?
Good question.
Well,
I love cities like Abilene. They're fantastic.
But I go back to, and it's what you said in the last block, Larry, it is about the economy. And the economy, no one in this country needs to turn on the TV and listen to professional bloviators tell them that their wages are going up, or tell them that they feel more financially secure, that they feel like that they can actually change jobs with ease
tell
for
them
the
it's not
first time
happening,
in a decade, and talk down the economy. They don't need that. They know that. And it's not on their mind about watching somebody take shots at the president when they're sitting in a hospital with their relative getting a chemotherapy infusion, or they're out, shopping for back to school clothes. All of that, it falls by the wayside.
But if you are, for instance, a healthcare voter, which a lot of Americans are, because healthcare is an economic issue, Democrats have a huge advantage there. And it was tied with the economy as the #1 issue.
Some of the premium increases aren't as much as people expected in some states, and they're actually
suddenly
falling
the cost of
in some areas.
Is not raising at an exponential rate because it's under President Trump. Oh, we've got to go.
Thanks to Obama.
Okay, more outnumbered in just a moment.
Hi, I'm William Devane. You've heard me talk about how smart it is to buy gold, but do you know what else is smart? Silver. There's a growing global demand for silver, so don't miss out. I buy my silver from Roslyn Capital.